So the first thing we want to do is crumble up some vegan sausage. I had 3 different kinds of vegan sausage that I used for this. One was the chorizo from Upton Naturals. The other 2 were from Field Roast. One was an Italian style and the other was the apple sage. So I just crumbled that up with my hands. You can use any vegan sausage you like, and I go into this more in the blog post about what to do with the vegan sausages, so check that out. So then I'm just going to cut my potatoes in half, and then these are the little baby potatoes. I love them. If you want to use a full-size potato and just chop it up into pieces, you could totally do that. So now we're going to add everything into the crock pot. So I'm going to add in my potatoes, those vegan sausages we crumbled up, some garlic, about 3 cloves that I just roughly chopped, about 1/3 of a sweet onion. I like Vidalia onions, any sweet onion will do. Some vegan Parmesan, this is one from Trader Joe's, some low sodium veggie broth and water. Please make sure it's low sodium because otherwise this soup will be way too salty. A little bit of black pepper, a tiny bit of salt, and then some bay leaves. And that's pretty much it. We're just going to give this a little stir just to kind of get everything mixed up in there. And then we are going to cook it on high for 3 hours until those potatoes are really nice and soft. So then just put your lid on and go about your day. Do what you need to do. When it is all done, it will look something like this, nice and steamy. Look at that. And when you first taste this, it might be too salty, but don't worry because we're going to take care of that in a second. Remove the bay leaves because we do not want to eat those. And then we are just going to add in our spinach, put that in there, and then just give it a little stir. And then you can cover this with the lid again and set it to the side. It's going to wilt. So we're going to make a cashew cream. So we're just going to blend up some cashews and water. Again, please check out the blog post for substitutions if you have a nut allergy. So I'm just going to blend this up to make my cashew cream until it is nice and smooth. And then that's it. Just pop this into the soup with everything else, and then the spinach will have wilted by now too, which is great. So you can see it's all cooked down and wilted and whatever, just because the crock pot was so hot. Add in that cashew cream and give everything a nice mix together until it is all well incorporated. And that's pretty much it. This soup is basically done. I mean, come on, how beautiful does that look? And oh, I just want to like dive in there. I love this color and the creaminess. It is so good. You're going to absolutely love it. So now it is time to plate it up. So just, add it to a nice bowl. Get a nice hearty serving in there, and then I garnished it with some fresh oregano and black pepper. You do not need to do that if you don't want to. Obviously, I was just trying to make it look pretty for pictures. And that's it. This is so easy, so delicious. Serve it up with some crusty bread and like a side salad. Perfect fall night dinner. So we are going to use 1 block of extra firm tofu for this recipe, and if you're using extra firm tofu, I'm going to highly encourage you to give it a good press. So I'm just opening up my package of tofu. I'm going to run to the sink and hope I don't spill any water along the way. And now we can finish opening it up. And you can also use super firm tofu for this recipe. It's whatever you want to use. So I'm going to remove that block of tofu, and then I'm just going to put it right into my tofu press. I will have this tofu press linked down below. You guys have seen me use this before. It's a great little tofu press. So I'm just going to pop the lid on, seal it up, and press it and put it to the side. While we press that, I'm going to cut up 1 sweet potato. I don't mind the skin on my sweet potato, so I'm leaving it. Just make sure to clean it well, or you can peel it. So I'm just cutting it into little slices, and then I'm going to cut those slices into like quarters or 6 pieces as we get into those bigger slices, just so that they're all about the same size, so that way they cook up evenly in the oven. And I'm just popping those into a nice big bowl, and then I have some baby potatoes, and I'm popping that in the bowl. I like the combination of sweet and salty. So as you can see, our tofu is nice and pressed. Look at all that water on the bottom of there. That's so good that we got that out because it's going to help it cook up in the oven so much better. So I'm popping that lid off, and then we are just going to cut the tofu crosswise into like 8 to 10 cuts, making about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch thick rectangles. And you can cut this however you want if you want to do cubes, but I like these bigger rectangles for something like this. So now we are going to put this aside, back to our potatoes. So we're drizzling this olive oil on top. This was actually a lemon olive oil that I had got. I'll link it down below. It was really good. Gonna add some salt, black pepper, garlic powder, and then we're gonna add in some fresh rosemary that I chopped up and the juice of 1/2 of a lemon, and just give this a nice toss. And that's all you have to do. Very easy. Don't throw away this lemon. We're going to use that later in the oven. So just mix this up, and that's all you got to do for the potatoes. Very simple. And if you have other seasonings you like to put on your potatoes, go ahead. So now for our tofu, we are just going to sprinkle one side with some salt, black pepper. Then we're going to add a little bit of garlic powder. Then we're going to add some paprika. I love adding paprika because it adds such a nice color. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of spray oil. I just like it. It's easier to coat the tofu with. I'm only seasoning one side because you'll see in a second. So we're going to pop all those potatoes onto a nice big sheet pan. Then we're going to put the seasoned side down of the tofu so that way we can season the other side a little bit. So to finish this off, we're going to add some lemon slices in there. And that's why I said don't throw away that lemon, because we're going to use it. We're going to add another little drizzle of that lemon olive oil, or regular olive oil is totally fine. And then we're going to add some more fresh rosemary right on top. And we're going to sprinkle it with some extra black pepper and some paprika. I don't do another round of salt until later. That's just my preference. If you want to put salt on right now, go for it. Bake this in the oven at 425 for 20 minutes. And that's it. And it'll already start to like be cooked up so nicely and just smell so good. The house smelled amazing while I was making this. So we're going to take this out of the oven, and then we are going to very carefully flip our tofu and potatoes. This actually wasn't as hot as I thought it was, so you'll see me grabbing with my hands, but be careful. Please don't, like, if it's hot, just be careful. Use a little tongs like I did. So I'm just flipping those around, and then we're going to add on some frozen string beans. Yes, you can add frozen string beans right into the oven, completely frozen, don't worry. Gonna do one final little drizzle of olive oil on top just for those string beans, and we're going back in the oven for another 15 minutes. When it's all done, it should look something like this. You can see the potatoes are nice and roasted up, they're soft. The tofu is brown and crispy, and those string beans are nice and soft now. So we're gonna add our final round of salt. I'm going to add a few sprigs of rosemary just to make it look pretty and just to garnish it. And then I'm going to add some lemon juice. You can add some extra olive oil on top if you want. It's whatever you want to do. And that's really it. I mean, this is a meal that makes itself, and it just looks absolutely gorgeous. Like I think this is a beautiful meal, and I think even for the holidays coming up, this would look beautiful on a table. And you know, you can obviously double this recipe and you can customize it. I have all things to customize on the blog post, things you can do and like that, so definitely check it out. But I just think it looks so gorgeous and festive and fun, and I love how those lemons turn just this beautiful color. So now we can plate it up and enjoy, and that's really all you got to do to make this delicious meal. Hello everyone, let's make this delicious stuffed spaghetti squash with a pumpkin bolognese. So we're gonna start out by cutting one of our spaghetti squash. Now these can be a little hard to cut, so all you're gonna do is you're going to pop it into the microwave for about 5 minutes, and then look how much easier my knife is gonna glide right in there. This also makes the roasting process much quicker. So we're gonna cut it in half, and then we are going to scoop the seeds out of the middle. As always, the full runout recipe is on my blog. Check the link in the description box down below for that, and the ingredients are down below as well. So after I've scooped them all out, you can save these seeds and you can roast them if you want. And then we're going to put some spray oil on here, some salt, and a little bit of cinnamon. Cinnamon gives a really nice seasonal touch, and you're gonna pop these in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes. You're gonna flip them over as well, so that way they roast on the insides, and these are just so good. They're gonna make your house smell amazing too because of the cinnamon. In the meantime, let's get started on our pumpkin bolognese. So we're going to add some olive oil, some onion, some celery, carrots, and minced garlic into a pan, and we're gonna saute that for about 5 to 7 minutes until it gets really nice and fragrant. That's the starter of this. So then we're gonna take some Plant Boss plant crumbles, or you can use any vegan ground beef you like. Add that into the pan with some non-dairy milk, and I'm just kind of like continuously mixing this around as I go. And then we're gonna add in our pumpkin puree, and then we're going to mix again. And then we're gonna add in some tomato sauce. I like either like the Rayo's or the Vincent's brand of tomato sauce, really good. Mix this all up, and then you're just gonna kind of let this cook and saute, let those flavors marry together. And we're gonna add in some nutritional yeast as well, or you can use vegan Parmesan, whatever you like. And as it's cooking, if you see it's getting a little bit dry, don't be afraid to add in some tablespoons of water here and there, mix it up, and you know, just let it do its thing. You don't want this to be too watery though. This should be nice and thick. Once it's all cooked, set it to the side. Our spaghetti squash are done. You can see how different they look now. So we're going to start the fun process of shredding it. All you need to do is take your fork and just start shredding away. I went pretty close to the edge, so that was basically just like the skin left. There was no flesh really inside. So then we're going to pop it into our sauce, and you're just going to toss everything together. Then we're going to put it back into our spaghetti squash skin because we're making stuffed spaghetti squash. We're going to top it with a little bit of vegan mozzarella, and then I like to put some foil just because it helps the cheese to start melting better. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. After about like 10 minutes, I took it off, and then we put it back in the oven again, and they look like this when they're done. And this was so flavorful and so delicious. I added a little bit of sea salt and some fresh thyme on top for a little seasonal touch, and that's really all you have to do. If you don't want to put them back into the spaghetti squash skin and leave the vegan cheese out, you definitely can just eat this on its own. It really is so delicious. And if you aren't into spaghetti squash, then put it on some pasta. You can use zoodles or regular pasta or gluten-free pasta or whatever you need to use for your own dietary needs. But I really encourage you to try this because it's so good. Let's start this off by taking 1 block of super firm tofu, and I'm going to poke little holes in it with a skewer. This will just help the veggie broth that we're going to put it in to kind of like get in there quicker, give a little more flavor to the tofu. So then I'm going to use better than bouillon, and I'm going to mix that with water to make a veggie broth, hot water. You could also just use a already store-bought veggie broth, whatever you like to use, but I really like the better than bouillon because it has a lot of flavor. So just mix this up until the paste is broken down and dissolved into the water. Take a container, and then we're just going to add that in. If you're using like boiling water, hot water, make sure it's a container that's safe for that. And then we're going to add in some fresh herbs. So I have some fresh sage, rosemary, and thyme. You can also use dried herbs, whatever you have on hand. Add that block of tofu in there. We're going to let that sit for at least a half hour, but you can let it sit for over 2 hours if you want. And we're just going to flip it occasionally, and you can just let it sit out on the counter. It doesn't need to go in the fridge or anything like that. In the meantime, we will prepare our ingredients for our stuffing. So I'm going to start by chopping up 1 celery rib. I do not like a lot of celery in my stuffing, so literally 1 little piece is more than enough for me. And I'm just going to chop that up and dice it nice and small. And then we are going to cut up our onion. You should know this by now if you watch my videos. I'm very partial to a Vidalia onion, but use any onion that you like. And I'm just going to slice it up, and then I'll chop that into little pieces as well. Finally, we're going to add 1 leek, and I'm just going to chop off the ends and the top, cut it in half, and then give it little slices. And then you can also wash this pretty well after, because sometimes there's a lot of dirt in leeks. So just give it a good rinse. Now we're going to add in a vegan butter to our pan along with all the veggies that we just chopped up. Let those saute for like 3 to 5 minutes until everything is, translucent, fragrant. Add a little bit of salt and pepper if you like. Just give that a mix and just let it saute for a few minutes. And then we're going to add in our vegetable broth. Again, I used the better than bouillon and mixed it, but you can just use store-bought vegetable broth. Once it's boiling, remove it from the heat. We're going to add in our bread cubes. I go into the bread cubes that I use in the blog post, but they're from Pepperidge Farm. Just check your ingredients, and some pecans that I kind of like really roughly chopped. And just mix this together and then set it to the side so the bread cubes can soak up that broth. Let's take our tofu out of here. I let it sit for a half hour. Do not throw away these herbs in this veggie broth. We're going to save this. Just put it to the side for a second. We're going to take our rice paper wrappers. So I have 3 that I used for this, and you're just going to dip them in water, just exactly like when you make a fresh rice paper roll. So just dip them in water, get them nice and flexible and pliable, and then you're just going to wrap them around your tofu. And that's really it. It won't be big enough to wrap around the whole block of tofu like this. That's why we're gonna need to use multiple. But yeah, just kind of like wrap it all around, get all the sides really well, and that's it. It's fairly simple to do. It's really not that big of a deal. So looks like this cute little package. So now we are just going to brush this with some oil that I mixed with paprika, salt and pepper, just to give the rice paper some nice color and, just to make it look good on the outside and give it a lot of flavor. I used half of the oil that I made, and I go back later on, you'll see. And make sure to get all the sides, get the bottom as well. We don't want anything to be skimping. I'm just going to lightly brush the bottom of my pan just because I'm always paranoid that things are going to stick. This is just like a 9x11 baking dish. Add that stuffing in there and then just spread it out so it makes a nice even layer. And then you're just going to put the tofu right on top. That's all you got to do. Then I saved those herbs from that veggie broth that I told you not to get rid of, and we're just going to put that on top just to make it fragrant and add some extra flavor. We're going to bake this in the oven at 400 degrees for 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, take it out. Not much is going to change, and then you're just going to brush it with the rest of the oil that's remaining. Then you're going to pop it back in the oven for 30 minutes. And that's it. You just let it do its thing in there. Now let's make our gravy. So we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of vegan butter to that same pan that I made the stuffing in. I didn't even wash it. And then we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. If you're gluten-free, you can use cornstarch or an alternative flour. Mix this together until it has been absorbed, and then we're going to slowly add in the vegetable broth. This is exactly like how when we made the broccoli cheddar soup. Add it in nice and slow, so this way the gravy doesn't get clumpy. And you'll see, like, as you keep adding it, and then it comes together, and then you kind of break it apart again. And any little clumps you're seeing right now are actually just kind of little bits of leftover tofu, which I personally don't really care too much about. Season it with some black pepper, garlic powder, some fresh thyme. I mean, anything that you want to put in there. Bring it to a boil and then remove it from the heat, and it will thicken as it cools. And if you want to add like caramelized onions or some mushrooms or whatever, you can add it in. This is a very simple gravy to make, but I like that we utilize that veggie broth that we marinated the tofu in for a little bit for another purpose. And now it is all done and it looks like this. So the first thing I want to do, well, first of all, let's listen to that crisp. Doesn't that sound really good? Okay, so I'm going to take those herbs out and we're going to set them to the side. They're done. They've done their job. Remove the tofu from the pan, and the tofu does leave like a little mark on top of the stuffing. So for aesthetic purposes, I just gave the stuffing another mix around. You don't have to do that if you don't care that much. It's not that big of a deal. Now, you should let this tofu cool for 15 minutes. I was an eager beaver and I did not. I tried to cut into it after like a minute. I was burning my hands and the rice paper started to fall off a little bit. Let it cool, because as I let it cool, it sliced a lot easier. So have a second of patience like I did not. And then I just kind of sliced it and arranged it on top of the stuffing, drizzled my gravy over top, and we all need some slow-mo gravy action in our life, don't we? Look at that. Add any fresh herbs that you want on top, some black pepper. I did like fresh oregano and fresh thyme and fresh rosemary, and isn't this just beautiful? Like, I think this is a really nice dish. It's really not that complicated to make. I like that you throw it in the oven and let the oven do the work so you can make other things in the meantime. And, you know, side dishes, or honestly, even if you just wanted to make like one side dish if you're doing like a smaller holiday, I think this is great. You'll get about 4 servings from this, so it's really flavorful. Do not skimp on doing the gravy, okay? Make the gravy. It takes like 4 seconds. It's so easy to do, and it adds so much flavor, and I feel like gravy just, it brings the dish together. So let's plate it up. Of course, we're gonna add that stuffing. The stuffing was so good. I really loved having the pecans in there and a few pieces of our tofu, and you can add some extra black pepper on top. And this was really, really delicious. And I really liked the rice paper on the outside. That was a really cool thing. So I'm glad I tried it out like that. And yeah, and it's a little close-up action. Looks so good. We are going to start this off by taking 1 block of super firm tofu or high protein tofu. It's the kind that is vacuum sealed and has not a lot of water in it. And we're going to cut it into thirds. Then from there, you're just going to use your hands to break the tofu into bite-sized chunks, little pieces just like this. Very easy, very simple to do. And then once it's all done, you'll have all your little tofu pieces. I like to cut it up into thirds so you can get more pieces out of the tofu. From there, we are going to place it into a 9 by 11 baking dish. Just get all your little tofu bites in there. Doesn't have to be fancy or lined up perfectly or anything. Then we're going to add some seasoning. So I have dried parsley, salt, poultry seasoning, black pepper, paprika, and garlic powder. So a lot of good things to make it very tasty. We also have some cornstarch, which is going to help make a nice outer coating on the tofu, and half of a lemon, which is going to add, of course, some acidity and zest. So I'm going to start by sprinkling the tofu pieces with the cornstarch, and then we're also going to add the seasonings on there, and then I'm just going to use my hands and toss to coat all of our little pieces in all the seasonings and the cornstarch, and then I'm going to lay them kind of out flat. Now I'm going to make sure that they have their space, and then I'm just going to squeeze some of the lemon juice over it, half of the lemon. Make sure you don't get any pits on there, because then that won't be good. We don't want to eat pits. Then we're going to add vegan butter on top, and this is going to help make it really just delicious and good. We're going to bake this at 400 Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. Then we're going to take it out. We're going to add a tablespoon of olive oil over the top to add a little extra fat and just kind of help make more of a little bit of a sauce in the bottom of here. I'm going to scrape my tofu very carefully, just making sure nothing's sticking. Just be gentle with it though. Then we're going to pop it back in the oven for 50 Fahrenheit for 15 minutes. And this is going to get it really crispy and really cooked up. And then when it's all done, it's going to look like this. You can see it is just golden and beautiful from that paprika. Sprinkle some coarse sea salt on top if you like, a little bit of extra black pepper. And that's really it. That's all you have to do. It's all done. Looks so good. And I love this. It really reminded me of the flavors of, like I said, the roasted chicken my mom used to make when I was little. And I just love it. The paprika, vegan butter, and the lemon together just work so well. It is so good. And like I said, I think it's a great weeknight dinner. It's really easy to make. You get a lot of servings out of it. You can serve it with whatever vegetables you like and grains. And I just think it's a really good meal to be able to make, and I think it would even be good for the holidays because it's so simple and it'd be really good. So I think you guys will really enjoy it if you try it. So we need to first take 2 vegan sausages. I'm using the hot Italian ones from Beyond Meat, and we are going to cut them in half, and then we are just going to remove the insides from that outer casing. We don't need that outer casing. We just want the inside parts so it can be nice and crumbly. You can use any vegan sausage that you like. And then we're going to chop up about 1/3 of an onion. I just like to chop it up really nice and small, so that way when it cooks, it's not like big giant pieces of onion hanging out in our sauce. And I also am going to chop up 3 cloves of garlic. If you like things more garlicky, feel free to add more garlic. And I'm just giving everything one little final chop before we bring it over to the stove. Then we're going to heat up 1 tablespoon of olive oil in a large fry pan, and then we are going to add in our chopped up onion and garlic and let that saute for about 3 minutes, just until everything goes fragrant. Do this over a low or medium-low heat, so that way nothing burns. And then you can add in your vegan sausage, and you can use, your spoon or your spatula, whatever you're using, to kind of toss everything around to help break it up a little bit. Cook this for about 5 minutes over a medium heat until it starts to sizzle and get crispy. And then once it starts to turn a little bit browned up, you can be done, just like how it looks here. We're going to add in a 1/4 cup of tomato paste and just mix that around slightly. It's not going to really dissolve or anything, it's just going to kind of stick. And then we are going to add in what I like to call our cashew heavy cream. So I just blended up 1/2 cup of soaked cashews and 3/4 cup of non-dairy milk, unflavored, no sweetener, nothing in it, and till it was nice and smooth. And then we are just going to add it into our sauce like this, and it's just going to make it nice and creamy and very easy to do. The full instructions for that are on my blog. It's really not hard to do at all. And then we're just going to add a little bit of water. I added about 1/2 cup of water just to help thin it out a little bit. This is going to cook for a little while, so we don't want it to get too thick. We're going to add in some organic sugar to help fight the acidity and a little bit of salt. And from there, we're just going to let this simmer for about 20 minutes over a low heat. And as you need, you can add little bits of water, like a tablespoon at a time, just to, like I said, help thin it out. It's going to thicken while it cooks, which is totally fine, but it might get too thick. So then we're going to cook up 8 ounces of pasta. I'm using rigatoni because it is my favorite. Once it's all done, we're going to pop our rigatoni right into our sauce. And I always encourage you to save your starchy pasta water. I'm adding a 1/4 cup of that. It really helps to coat the pasta nicely in the sauce, and we just need a little bit of slow-mo action for this. How beautiful does that sauce look? It's so glistening and gorgeous. Oh my gosh, I wish I had a bowl of this right now while I'm editing. All right, so we're just gonna taste it real quick. Tastes perfect, but if you wanna adjust any salt, if you wanna add some red pepper flakes, whatever, you could do that now. Sprinkle it with a little bit of fresh parsley, and that's it. You're all done. That's all you gotta do. You could add some vegan Parmesan on top if you want. I didn't have any. And it is just, oh, look at that. Come on. That is beautiful. So easy to make, so good. If you are allergic to nuts, I will have substitutions on the blog post for you, so go check that out. And I think you will really enjoy this if you make it. So I chopped up all my veggies. We have carrots, shallots, garlic, rosemary, and thyme. And then I have a can of chickpeas that I drained and rinsed. We are going to bring these over to our stove in a big pan. I am going to add in some vegan butter. I'm using the one from Yoko's. Let that melt down, and then we're going to add everything in there. Just give this a little toss, and we're just going to cook everything up for about 10 to 15 minutes. And I'm going to put a lid on it so it helps it to steam and helps it to soften up quicker. I also have some cooked up lentils that I didn't film, so if you want to do that while you're doing this. And I'm just going to continuously check on them. We're going to add in some seasonings because we obviously want this to taste good. So we're adding in black pepper, salt, onion powder, garlic powder. You can go crazy with the seasonings, add as much flavor as you like. It's all up to you. And of course you can add in other vegetables if you like mushrooms, or you want to add in some greens, or whatever you want to put in here. So after about 10 minutes, we're going to take this off and we're going to put this all in a blender. We're not going to blend it to be completely smooth. We still want there to be texture, but we're going to give it a good blend. I didn't realize my blender was on the high setting, so we encounter a bit of a problem in a second. And I'm also going to add in some water just to help the blender. So as you can see, I kind of went a little crazy, but something like this, just so it's mostly broken down, but there's still some texture. In a bowl, we're going to prepare a flax egg. So this is just flaxseed meal and water, very simple to make, just to really help bind everything together. Gonna let that thicken up, and then we're gonna add in our stuff. So I'm gonna add in the blended up carrot chickpea mixture. So as you can see, there's still some texture to everything because we don't want this to be like mush. And then I'm adding in all my cooked lentils. And I also added salt to the lentils so they also have flavor. And we're just going to mix this up. So like I said, you can add in anything you want to this. It really is customizable. I'm giving it a little taste, and I'm just gonna add in a little more garlic powder and a little bit more salt because I just felt like it needed it. Oh, and I added in more onion powder too. Of course, taste this, adjust the seasonings, add in what you like. So now we are going to take some cling wrap and we are just going to dump out our filling. I know this is gonna look a little bit gross. It was not the most appealing looking food. And we are just going to shape this into a log, and the cling wrap is going to help us to give it like a nice tight shape. So I'm just using my spatula to make an initial shape here. And then we're just going to start to roll it up with the cling wrap, and this is just going to really help us to get a nice super tight cylinder shape, because in a Wellington it's kind of like perfectly circular almost. So yeah, just rolling this up. So once you've rolled it up, we're gonna place this in the fridge to firm up for about 20 minutes. This is the puff pastry I'm using. This one is accidentally vegan, so just definitely be sure to check your puff pastry ingredients and make sure, because a lot of them do have butter. I'm going to use a rolling pin and just roll everything out a little bit, just to help give some more space. Then I'm gonna take my log of filling and we're just gonna roll that up in the puff pastry. But as you can see, this really is very easy, and the puff pastry is very easy to work with. You just have to thaw it before you use it. We're gonna fold in the sides, so I just kind of did this like as if I were wrapping a present or something. And then I have a little bit of water on my hands, and I am just kind of wiping the water on there so that everything sticks together. Once it's all done, it kind of looks like a burrito. I'm gonna wipe it down with some non-dairy milk, mix with turmeric, just to help give it a super golden color. And now we're gonna add some fanciness to this Wellington. I decided to go with a kind of like a diamond shape on top. You can do whatever you want. I've seen people put lattices on top, people put shapes. It's really easy to just kind of like make a design on top, and it just looks extra pretty. We're gonna bake it for about 25 to 30 minutes until it's a beautiful golden brown. I mean, how good does that look? While it is baking, let's make an easy sauce. We're gonna add in some fresh thyme to a pot and just like pull the stem down, and then the little leaves will come off. We're gonna add in vegetable broth. This is a really dark veggie broth. And then I mix some cornstarch with veggie broth because it's gonna help to thicken it, but it just kind of helps to not clump up when it's in there. And then we're gonna add in some seasonings, and this is just like a really, really easy sauce, and it went really well with the Wellington. And you're just gonna cook this on a high heat, give it a whisk until it starts to thicken up. Add in a little bit of maple syrup for sweetness. It doesn't taste like sweet, but it just has that little extra sweetness, and a little extra salt because I felt it needed it. I used a low veggie sodium broth, so it has like no salt in there. And once the Wellington is all done, it's gonna look like this. And how damn gorgeous does this look? I just think on a holiday table with some veggies in there and everything, it's gonna look beautiful. So I plated it up, or well, I styled it, whatever, with rosemary and fresh thyme and just everything, and it looks so gorgeous. And like I said, it's very easy to work with the puff pastry, as you can see, and it comes out beautiful every time. Are you ready? Are you ready? Here we go, some inside action. It is definitely a hearty holiday dish, and it looks so beautiful and golden brown. And yeah, I paired it up with some actually cooked Brussels sprouts. I have a video on how I cook my Brussels sprouts, and like I think this would be great with mashed potatoes. Drizzled my sauce on top, and we can just take a bite and try some. So good. Starting off by making our pie crust dough. So I have some all-purpose flour here, and I'm just going to take my fork and run it around in there just to break up any big clumps. You can also sift it, and then we're going to add in a little bit of salt and organic cane sugar and just mix that up again. It's just important to mix it up so there's no big clumps of flour. Then using my fork, I'm going to make a little well in the middle, and we are going to put in ice cold water. Okay, really cold. For really good flaky pie crust, you want everything to be really cold, and some super cold vegan butter. Lots of it, because that's what makes it really good. And then using my fork, I'm just going to start to crumble the butter into there until we get it into pea-sized crumbly pieces. You can also do this in a food processor if you like. Either way, whatever works for you. So then I'm just going to dump my flour and butter and everything out, and we are just going to knead this together until it forms a nice dough ball, nice and smooth. It should come together really easily. If it's not, after a few minutes, you may need a little more water, but I doubt it. This is kind of my go-to pie crust recipe. I've made it multiple times, so it should be fine. And then I am just shaping it into a little ball. So this is the little baking dish I'm using. It's a 6-inch baking dish, and I need something to fill the inside with the pie crust and then the top of the pie crust. So I'm gonna cut my dough ball into 2 balls, a little bit uneven because I'm not gonna need as much pie crust to cover the top as I'll need to fill it inside. And I'm working it into a ball, and then we are just going to put this in the fridge to chill for about an hour while we work on our filling. So for our filling, I'm using this chicken from Tofurky. It's really good. Of course, use anything you have. And then we're gonna add some oil into a big pan, and then I'm gonna add in some chopped up carrots and onion. We're gonna cook those for a few minutes until the onions are translucent, about 5 to 7 minutes. And then we're gonna add in some more vegan butter, and I am using the one from Miyoko's in case you were curious, and we're just gonna let that vegan butter melt down. Once the vegan butter is really nice and melted, we are going to add in flour. The butter and the flour together form a roux, which is a thickening agent, and that's what makes the inside of this chicken pot pie so like creamy and delicious and good. And then once all the flour is kind of absorbed and brown and cooked in there and no longer looking like raw white flour, we are going to add in non-dairy milk. I am using unsweetened, unflavored almond milk. Use any non-dairy milk you like and just whisk it in there and stir it in so that way there's no large clumps and the flour can really cook in there. And then we're gonna add in some vegetable broth as well. So we're just gonna let this cook and thicken up. Into here, we're gonna add some peas and corn, and then of course our vegan chicken. And I'm just gonna kind of use my little spatula to break everything up, get it well incorporated. Really no right or wrong way to do this. So then I'm gonna add in some seasonings, a tiny bit of salt because there was some butter in here in the veggie broth, although I am using low sodium veggie broth, some pepper and some thyme, the tiniest little bit because I don't want it to be like overly seasoned. And then we're just gonna mix that together, and that's pretty much it for our filling. I mean, you can add in more seasonings if you like. I prefer mine to be a bit more on the plain side, and it's just gonna be nice and thick, and it's a perfect filling. So I'm taking my chilled dough ball and I'm working on it on a floured surface, and we are just gonna roll this out to a pretty thin, maybe like a 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 an inch thick, nice big circle. And then I'm gonna roll that pie crust up onto the rolling pin to help transfer it into the bowl. So I am just draping it over this baking dish, and then I'm gonna kind of push the pie crust in there and make sure everything is lined with pie crust, and then I'll cut off any excess edges and touch up anywhere that I need to touch up. So then we're gonna spoon in our filling into here, and this is, oh my gosh, it's so good. I'm just so hungry watching this video. Now, of course, you can make little mini pot pies. You can make a one like big like 9-inch pot pie. I just saw this baking dish and it was just too cute to pass up on. And then I'm taking my other piece of dough that I rolled out, draping that over, kind of sealing that up, and then I will cut off any of those excess edges. And this recipe should be enough to fill a 9-inch pan or to make like 3 to 4 little mini ramekins. And then I'm just going to seal the top of the pie with my fork. You could be super fancy and flute the edges if you like, but you know, I think a little bit of the fork pressure is fine. And then we are just going to put some almond milk that I mixed with some turmeric on top just to give it extra goldeny crust. And then I made a little X to ventilate, and we're gonna bake this in the oven at 400 for about 30 minutes. When it's done, it should look like this. It kind of puffs up out of the baking dish, which is so cute. And it's super golden and gorgeous on top, and it's flaky and crumbly, and it's delicious. And then I just added a few sprigs of fresh thyme on there just to make it look pretty. And this is it. Oh my goodness. It is, oh my God, I'm in love with this. I'm just so in love. It's like so pretty. It's so golden. It's so gorgeous. And are you ready for the inside? Oh yes. Flaky, flaky crust, creamy, delicious filling. Just really so good. Perfect for the holidays. Perfect to share with family, friends, a Friendsgiving, a Thanksgiving, whatever. It's just so good, and I know you guys are really going to enjoy it. We're going to start by making our sauce. So we're going to heat up some olive oil in a large pan and then add in some chopped up onion and garlic. Just let those cook for a few minutes, about 2 to 3 minutes. Add a little bit of salt to help them sweat, and just keep an eye on them. Just let them start to turn fragrant. Then I boiled some lentils, so we are adding those cooked lentils in, already done. You can either cook them yourself, or Trader Joe's already has like a steamed lentil, you could use that. Then we're going to add in a box of palmy tomatoes. If you don't have palmy, you can use like a tomato sauce, just use an equivalent amount, and then just put that all into the pan. I like to fill it up about halfway with water, that container, add that in there, and just give this a nice mix around. This is just going to thicken up and become a nice, beautiful sauce, and kind of like a meat sauce. I mean, obviously not really, but the lentils add a nice meatiness. Add some organic sugar. This adds sweetness to the tomatoes, and a little bit of salt as well. And you're just going to let this cook and simmer for about 20 minutes over a low heat until it gets nice and thick and looks something like this. Come on, that looks pretty good. That's a nice color. That's a nice texture. In the meantime, boil some pasta. I'm using actually baked penne. That's what we're making today, because I'm using penne pasta. I'm also using chickpea pasta for this. Use any pasta you like. Obviously you should use Ziti, I guess, but use anything you like. Add the cooked pasta to your sauce and just mix it around until it is all well incorporated, and that's pretty much it to start this off. So we're going to use vegan ricotta here. I'm using the Kite Hill one, but I'll have a recipe on the blog post and everything that you could use, and I'm just going to mix that in here. And then I also saved a little bit just so we could put it on top. So now let's put it into our big baking dish, and then just spread it out, and then we're going to just start to top it with some cheese. Also fill the pan up with a little bit of water, get that kind of last little bit, get that in there. So we're going to top it first with vegan mozzarella shreds. I'm using the Violife ones. Then we're going to use some Miyoko's vegan mozzarella. So we have like 2 different kinds of cheeses going on here. And then adding the final bit of the vegan ricotta. We are going to bake this in the oven at 375 for about 45 minutes, covered with foil. And you can also broil it for like 2 to 3 minutes if you like, so it gets really crispy and bubbly on top. It's totally up to you, and looks so good, so melty, so delicious. I don't like mine super burnt on top or anything like that, so I just broil for a few minutes and that's it. And whew, this was absolutely delicious. So good. Look at that. Look at how melty that is and how beautiful, and the colors, and the lentils are so good in here. So much flavor. Gonna add some greenery on top. You should know this by now if you've been watching this series. We're adding some fresh oregano, and that's it. Beautiful dish. Really not too complicated to make, especially when you use the store-bought ingredients like that. And now we can just take a nice big scoop of that and enjoy. To start this off, we're using extra firm tofu, and if you don't know this little hack, just take a knife, cut into the plastic, and then you can spill that water out into your sink, and then you can open up the rest of your tofu, and there's not really that much water in there, and it won't make a giant mess. So I'm going to take that tofu and just put it on a paper towel, give it a little squeeze. You can give it a full press if you want by placing a heavy object on it, putting it in a tofu press, but I just kind of squeezed it a few times in the paper towel, and it got out more than enough water, so that was fine. Then we're going to cut this. I just made nice sort of medium-sized rectangles. I cut it into 11 pieces. You can cut these as thick or as thin as you like, but I thought this was a good thickness. So then we're going to put the tofu into a dish. And now we're going to pour some veggie broth over this. We're going to use the juice of half of a lemon. Make sure there are no pits. Then we're going to add in some fresh rosemary, some fresh thyme, and doing this is going to give it the flavors that turkey is usually seasoned with, so it kind of has a turkey-ish flavor. We're going to add in some oregano, seasoning salt, paprika, regular salt, pepper. We put a lot of seasonings on this, garlic powder, and a little bit of parsley. And then you're just going to pop the top on this, give it a little shake, make sure kind of all the tofu has some flavor on it. And then you can do this up to 2 days in advance, or you could do it the morning of, but the longer the tofu sits in this marinade, the more flavor it's going to have. So here I'm just making sure that all the tofu kind of has access to these flavors and moving them around just to make sure that it can all soak it up. And you can just go in the fridge like every hour and give it a shake and make sure that the tofu is just kind of all getting enough flavor on it. So just refrigerate this as long as you like. This is it after about 3 hours. I would suggest doing it for as long as you can. And then I'm just going to put it in some panko breadcrumbs and get the breadcrumbs on it. Just a light breading. It'll stick because the tofu is wet. And if there's any of the pieces of rosemary. I would take those off just because they're a little bit big, but otherwise everything else, like the seasonings, are fine on there because they're a lot smaller. Just the rosemary is kind of big. So I'm just taking that tofu and then I'm going to place it on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper. Then this is optional, but I did a little drizzle of oil on them, just kind of however, didn't really matter. And this just helps to get them more crispy. So we're going to bake these in the oven at 400 for about 20-ish minutes. Then I'm going to take that leftover marinade and I'm going to strain it out. We're going to use this to make our gravy because this is nice and seasoned now and it tastes really good. So we're going to add in 2 more cups of veggie broth and a 1/4 cup of flour, and you're just going to mix. You can add in more seasonings if you like. You can add in more salt. You can add in more pepper. I think I added in a little bit more salt, but that was pretty much it because it had a lot of flavor. And just keep cooking until it thickens. If you have any giant globs of flour, you can remove those. And if you want to make it gluten-free, just use cornstarch instead. So these are our tofu cutlets all done. They're so golden and beautiful. And then I just poured some gravy on top to make it look nice and pretty. If your gravy thickens as it's been sitting there, you can pop it in the microwave for a few minutes, heat it up, and also add some more water in or vegetable broth just to help thin it again. I added on some fresh thyme and some black pepper and lemon to garnish the dish, and I think this is beautiful. You could put, of course, stuffing with it, vegetables, anything from the other sides, but I just think it looks so good. So to start off the shepherd's pie, we are going to chop up 3 russet potatoes. I obviously also already peeled these. And basically, this is just going to be used to make mashed potatoes. So cut them as big or as little as you like. So I'm putting that into a pot, and then I'm going to cover this with water. If you watched my last video, you can also use non-dairy milk, whatever you have. I didn't have that much non-dairy milk left, so I just used water. And we're just going to boil these until they're soft. In a cast iron skillet, I'm going to add some oil, and then I'm going to add in some onion and carrots, and just mix those around. We're going to cook this for about 5 minutes until they're nice and soft. Then I'm going to add in veggie broth, and we're going to add in some flour, and we're going to mix this all together to kind of make like a nice thick gravy, again, sort of like how we did before. So after it looks something like this, I added in another 1/2 cup of veggie broth, mixed it all around again. Then I added in 1 cup of cooked lentils, some frozen corn, and frozen peas. Gonna give that a little toss around to get everything coated in the mixture. And because lentils really like to soak up liquid, I decided to add in another 1/2 cup of vegetable broth because we want this to be nice and wet. We don't want it to be dried out. And then we're going to add in some soy sauce, some tomato paste. You can also add vegan Worcestershire if you have that. I didn't have any and I couldn't find any, so I didn't. You could add in some red wine if you like. There's a tons of ways to do this, but I did it just in the most easiest way. And then I added in a few little bits of fresh thyme, some salt, garlic powder, and pepper. And that's pretty much it. I just mixed this all up. I kind of let it cook for a little bit. And I did this in the cast iron skillet because I wanted to bake it in the skillet. You can transfer this into a glass baking dish or casserole dish, but it eliminates a dish cleaning, if you know what I mean. And then I just gave it a taste and I added in a little more garlic powder and salt. Make sure to taste this. Make sure it has flavor. Make sure you like how it tastes. This is all cooked. It's fine to eat. So now back to our potatoes. They're all cooked, so I added in some almond milk and vegan butter and salt, a little bit of black pepper, and just using the back of my fork, I'm gonna mash until it's nice and smooth. If you have a potato masher, your life will be a lot easier, but using the back of the fork works fine. As you can see, I got them nice and fluffy and whipped up. Exactly what we want. So now I just took some of the potato, put it on top to put a layer on top of the lentil base, but I knew I wanted to make it look extra fancy, so I ended up putting some of the mashed potatoes into a piping bag with a nice tip, and I just made little like flower-y kind of shapes on top. I don't know. This is very extra, and you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but honestly, it's so easy to pipe mashed potatoes. So I think you could do this if you wanted to, and I think it looks really pretty. Otherwise, just put them all on top and just kind of make a little design with your spatula. So this is it all done. We're gonna bake this in the oven at 400 for about 15 to 20 minutes, or until the tops turn nice and golden brown. I garnished it with some fresh thyme again. I'm kind of obsessed with fresh thyme lately. I just think it looks so pretty, and that is it, all done.